At you live from the I No on 2066 campaign event. We just did a little press conference with a few different media outlets. I rambled to King 5 before I had said a word to any human being this morning. So it's all seems like it's moving along. So I just wanted to kind of summarize HDC's involvement in the need for voting no on these two really crucial initiatives that are on ballots statewide in Washington this election, which ballots are mailed out in like a week. So this is really crunch time. GOTV, get out the vote in campaign speak. We have speakers from, it looks like Representative Fitzgibbon's here for now too. So we have speakers from both campaigns for these no campaigns. HDC is involved in this because they both have to do with going backwards on sustainable building progress. Affordable housing providers in King County are moving forward, not backwards. We know that low energy efficient housing is affordable housing in the long term. And there's a reason why the new affordable housing almost always uses low energy efficient appliances in our new buildings. And the incentive programs that local governments are able to create currently are at risk here. And that's through in 2066 primarily, and 2117 is crucial source of funding, not just to reduce carbon emissions, but also funding for crucial state services like affordable housing. So without further ado, Rachel Kohler from the No on 2066 campaign, can you just give us a short summary of the No campaign, what the initiative is, why we're opposing it, and some ways that folks can help out?
Thank you so much, Kyler. And I was at the press event that Kyler just talked about. He was a fabulous speaker. It was really it's kind of the boost that we all need in this point in the campaign when we've been working so hard to get the word out on the no vote for both 2066 and 2117. My name is Rachel Kohler. I'm the managing director of Shift Zero, and we are an alliance of over 60 green building, affordable housing, climate action organizations across Washington state. And together with our allies, including HDC, we advocate for a clean energy transition in our homes and buildings, getting them off of fossil fuels like natural gas. And that is why I am part of the campaign team for No on 2066. And I'm here today to talk about what this initiative really means for Washingtonians. So what we know is that this is a bad initiative that would have far-reaching effects on Washington families. And it's a confusing initiative because it impacts dozens of really important state and local policies and programs. That's because, and it's also confusing because the special interests and fossil fuel corporations behind it are putting out a lot of misinformation. So really appreciate these opportunities to help people really understand what's at stake. We know that Initiative 2066 would lead to higher energy bills. It removes requirements and tools for ratepayer protections and stops cost-effective utility resource planning, rolling back an affordable clean energy transition. And we know how important that is for all Washington families. Another impact of 2066, it would attack energy efficiency by rolling back modern protections that make homes and businesses more energy efficient. It also would jeopardize programs that help people living on lower incomes access clean energy upgrades like heat pumps. So these are just a few of the main impacts. We, for messaging at this point in the campaign, when you're talking to friends and family, keeping it really simple and emphasizing these really, important impacts is a way to help communicate this, why it's important to vote no. So again, I-2066 would lead to higher energy bills. It attacks energy efficiency, something we all love and appreciate. Energy efficiency, we all know that saves us money, keeps our buildings comfortable. And then it would jeopardize programs that help more Washington families access energy efficiency. So we cannot let Washington go backwards on this, these essential pieces of our long-term clean energy transition. We want everyone to know the facts. And one of the really important things we want people to know is that the proponents of 2066 have been doing a lot of misleading information, telling the public that there's a gas ban. This is not true. There is no gas ban. Gas utilities in our state are required by state law to provide gas service to anyone who wants it. And no one is forcing anyone to change out their appliances tomorrow. So we want to make sure people understand that as well when they might be hearing a lot of misinformation on 2066. We do know that what this initiative would do, again, is raise energy bills and costs for Washington families. So with that, I will pause for any questions, but really appreciate your time today in just kind of really, getting the record straight on this dangerous initiative and why it's important for all of us to vote no on 2066. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Rachel. I would say if you want to emphasize, like I've done enough in politics to know to follow the money. And one thing I'd say about 2066 that I actually learned today was it's not hard to figure out why the major donors to the 2066 initiative are supporting the continuance of fossil fuels and making it harder to transition away.
Yes. So definitely there's fossil fuel, this initiative is really part of a nationwide scheme by fossil fuel corporations and others to keep us locked into fossil fuels like natural gas, when in fact we know, we're already heading towards the clean energy transition. And this would really roll that back because it's in their financial interests to keep us locked into fossil fuels. So for example, with 2066, like the Coke industries are supporters. And that's one example. We know Northwest Natural Gas is a financial supporter, and Brian Haywood, who is the supporter of all these bad initiatives. Also, his hedge fund has a lot of fossil fuel companies and investments within that. So you can see who will profit with this initiative, and we know that who will lose as a result if this initiative were to pass is everyday Washingtonians.
Yeah. And on the other side, on the no campaign, is basically every Democrat you've ever heard of. So if that makes any difference.
And also an amazing statewide poverty action network. We've got unions, we've got health advocate voices, obviously climate action organizations, a really, really broad and amazing, strong coalition of voices against 2066. And that's been incredibly powerful to see.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Rachel. Does anyone have questions before we move on to 2117? And then I'll summarize it all up with how you can help get the word out, but for both these. Okay, Representative Fitzgibbon, thanks for joining us. Welcome to HGC.
Sure, thanks for having me. So I'm Joe Fitzgibbon. I'm in the State House of Representatives, and I worked very hard in 2021 to pass the Climate Commitment Act into law. Initiative 2117 would repeal the Climate Commitment Act. That's our cap on greenhouse gas pollution. We set a cap on greenhouse gas pollution, lower that cap over time until we get to net zero in 2050, and require the 100 largest polluters in Washington state to acquire allowances from the state of Washington, largely at auctions administered by the Department of Ecology, to compensate for the harm that their greenhouse gas emissions do to Washingtonians, not just to our climate, but also to our air quality, to our water quality, and to contributing to environmental health disparities. And we're investing the proceeds from those auctions in all kinds of things to make our state a better place, in improving our transportation systems, in transit and walking and biking infrastructure, in electric vehicle charging, in electrifying our state ferry fleet, in incentives for medium and heavy duty trucks to switch over from diesel to electricity, and incentives for homeowners and also owners of large multifamily buildings, of which HTC is well familiar, to have incentives for them to move towards more efficient, lower cost heating and cooling solutions. Much of what the same kinds of things that Initiative 2066, which you heard about from Rachel, would remove tools enabling homeowners and customers to access those incentives. We have so both of these initiatives would actually deprive residents of Washington of access to incentives to help them move towards cleaner, more comfortable, more affordable heating and cooling solutions for their homes, which I think is really a thread that ties them together, as well as connects to HDC's interest in opposing these initiatives. The big argument that the proponents of Initiative 2117 makes is that it'll make your gas cheaper. The reason they say that is because the Climate Commitment Act requires the largest emitters, which includes our state's oil refineries and anybody importing oil into the state, to acquire those allowances. That has a cost for the oil refineries. There's never been a question that it has that cost. And the oil companies have chosen to pass on some, but not 100% of the cost of those allowances to people filling up at the pump. The question that we are confronted with Initiative 2117 is, would enacting this initiative save people money on gas? We don't think there's any guarantee that it would, because the oil companies are going to have a reduced cost to them, but there's nothing in the initiative that guarantees that the oil companies have to pass along those savings. They may pass along some of the savings, or they may just choose to return the savings from not having to pay for their pollution to their shareholders and their executives. We just don't know. But what we do know is that the billions of dollars of investment in salmon recovery and wildfire prevention, in hunger relief, and in our transition to a cleaner energy future, would be done away with. Our transportation system, which is already facing some real strains and some funding challenges as the gas tax declines, would blow a huge hole in our transportation budget. 1.25 ferries are planned to be funded directly out of Climate Commitment Act resources, as well as free transit for Washingtonians under age of 18, lots and lots of transit, both operating and capital expenditures, and lots of bike and pedestrian safety projects. If you eliminate all of those, we're going to have to shift money that's currently going to things like highway safety projects to cover some of those needs that would be defunded by Initiative 2117. So every aspect of our transportation system, even the ones that aren't directly getting dollars from the Climate Commitment Act right now, would be harmed, and people's mobility and people's safety would be harmed, particularly by the transportation impact. About half of the money that the Climate Commitment Act raises goes into transportation. So the impacts of this initiative would be pretty devastating. I would say, on the terms of the broader fight against climate change, we have states all across the country that are watching Washington right now to see what happens with this initiative. They're trying to decide, what their next steps should be in their fight against climate change. New York, Oregon, Colorado, Minnesota, Massachusetts, Maryland, New Jersey, all those folks are contemplating what should their next big step be. Washington and California are the only states in the country that have an economy-wide cap on carbon pollution, and obviously we need more states to join us in that effort. And if we defeat this initiative, not just particularly if we defeat it by a lot, that will send an amazing signal to state governments around the country that they should up their level of ambition, and that they should cap their greenhouse gas pollution going forward, which of course everybody that joins us in this effort makes our progress both more affordable and more successful. So I think we are on track to we really have to get the message out to Washingtonians about the misleading nature of the initiative, the fact that it promises a cost savings that it doesn't guarantee, the harms it would do by defunding all of these really badly needed investments, in everything that I described already. And just the incredible coalition supporting it. Unlike, when there was a debate over, a vote over a carbon tax 6 years ago on the ballot, where you had the environmental community, supporting it, the business community opposing it, organized labor and tribes largely sat that fight out. This year you have tribes, labor, enviros, business, even the conservative Seattle Times, the conservative Columbian newspaper, the Everett Herald, all saying vote no on Initiative 2117, whereas the folks, in support are largely, the hedge fund guy from California and the state Republican Party. So I'll stop there. I appreciate your interest in the subject. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Representative. I I listened on NPR recently that like this is also the idea of the carbon market is actually a very old like free market approach to how we should handle this. This is like this is the conservative way of trying to combat the impacts of climate change from before every conservative decided that actually fossil fuel industry was more important to preserve.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Kyler. The cap and trade as a mechanism has been used to address and solve many of the air pollution problems that have been solved in the last few generations. Leaded gasoline was phased out by Ronald Reagan's EPA using cap and trade. Acid rain was addressed by George H.W. Bush's EPA by putting a cap on sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide emissions. In both of those cases, the cost ended up being vastly less than it was projected when they first adopted those regulations. Even Donald Trump signed into law that used cap and trade to phase out certain chemicals used in refrigeration that are very powerful greenhouse gases. And that was, there was a bipartisan consensus that phasing out hydrofluorocarbons using cap and trade was the right thing to do. And that was actually the last bill he signed into office before he left the first time. So there's a reason that businesses, think this is understood by some of the big polluters that know that they are going to have to clean up their act, that this is the most effective and cost-effective way for us to reduce pollution at the scale that we have to do it. That the other alternative, which is basically what happened before cap and trade came about, was sort of facility by facility standards, which end up costing more and reducing pollution less than the system that we have in place. But that is probably what we're going to have to turn to if the initiative passes.
Yeah, well, and then I guess one other question is because we're trying to mostly aim our efforts at both affordable housing providers and the whole sector, but particularly residents of affordable housing in King County, who a lot of them maybe a lot of people in King County and in transit-oriented communities don't have to drive that much. They're much more reliant on buses and transit options. And are also like as a resident of affordable housing, we need operational costs to be addressed at the state level. We need more affordable housing at the state level. How does 2117 how would the passage of 2117 affect affordable housing and transit funding?
Yeah, so there's direct both operations and transit. There's a number of transit projects that are funded directly out of CCA resources. I don't have that spreadsheet in front of me, but a lot of really important projects to help transit agencies across the state, including King County Metro, modernize their fleets, modernize their facilities, get both cleaner and less and quieter buses on the road. We know that the noise pollution is also something that has an impact on our health. And operational funding. The state is providing direct operational funding to transit agencies using Climate Commitment Act dollars. So there's a really significant chance of cuts to transit service if the initiative passes. There are also projects for bike and pedestrian safety that would no longer have a funding source if the initiative passes. And so, we're talking to voters all across the state in different places. There's different things that are front of mind for folks. In Wenatchee and Ellensburg, wildfire prevention is really the thing that we lead with. In Bremerton and Whidbey Island and Vashon Island, we're talking about the cuts to ferry service. I think in the urban parts of King County, we're talking about impacts to transit service. We're talking impacts on air quality. One of the things that's funded out of the Climate Commitment Act is a network of air quality monitoring stations, so we can have better information about where and when air quality is bad, so people can stay inside, use a mask, whatever, and also so that we can get to the source of those air pollution problems. The biggest impact on air pollution in Washington by far is wildfires. And there's millions and millions of dollars going from Climate Commitment Act resources to prevent wildfires, because obviously that smoke doesn't just stay, in Eastern Washington. It impacts all of us. So the harms to people in Seattle, for example, I think are, that we lead with, that are, in my legislative district, which is basically, the south part of downtown Seattle through West Seattle and out to Vashon Island. Air quality, transportation harms, especially harms to transit, and food security certainly is we have grants going from Climate Commitment Act dollars to help connect food banks with food producers, farmers, and food distributors to make sure less food goes to waste, and we get more food into our hunger relief networks like Food Lifeline and Second Harvest. So there's absolutely going to be impacts in Seattle. There's going to be impacts in every part of the state if this initiative passes.
Yeah, and I'll just to slightly add to that, I think that anytime you blow a multi-$100-million hole in the budget, some of that will get funded in minor pieces in other places, and that money comes out of other funding
priorities. Oh yeah,
like
I should have mentioned that too, right? That you don't take $3 billion out of the state operating capital and transportation budgets without greater pressure on everything that remains, right? We have been able to resource our spending on climate and clean energy in the capital budget directly out of CCA dollars, so they're not in competition with things like the Housing Trust Fund. If you take away this funding source, they're back in competition with the Housing Trust Fund like they were before the CCA passes. And that means everything else gets squeezed a little bit.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's hitting the nail on the head there. So with our final few minutes, I want to mention how HDC is working with our members to, with all of you, to try and get the word out to folks in our affordable housing buildings. So one, the main avenue is if you look at the link that I just put in the chat, that's a Google form to get materials. If you work in buildings or are in an organization that has buildings and you can distribute them, let us know who we can send some flyers so that you can put those up at like community bulletin boards on the front door. Nonprofits are able to participate in this and help get the word out as HDC members. This is something that our board has gone behind. This is something that a lot of nonprofits and affordable housing providers are realizing is close to an existential threat to the statewide level of funding. And on 2066, it's, we're already leading. We're already at HDC. We're leading on sustainable development. There's no reason that we should turn back the clock and allow for, make it more difficult to provide clean energy to our all electric buildings. So that link, that Google form, will make sure on the recorded version that it gets attached along with the video. That's how we can get materials out to our building managers. If you are an organization that you aren't necessarily the building or asset manager or a resident services coordinator who is working in buildings every day, please forward this on to the folks who are. It's a powerful way of getting the word out. We can really magnify the impacts because each building often has hundreds of folks who can see this every day. And hopefully also by watching this video, people like resident service coordinators are able to help answer questions about voting and make sure that people are engaged on these important initiatives that are kind of confusing. So Christy, Samaya, Evan, if anyone has any last questions before we finish off here, I'd really welcome those. Otherwise, I think we're right almost at time.
I'm off the fence. I know where I'm voting now. Just kidding. I already knew, but it was beautiful. Thank you, because I feel like I can now talk to some more of the staff that are working with the residents, maybe give them a little brief.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Evan.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Thanks, everyone who will be watching this later on. And have a wonderful afternoon. Let's get the word out.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Lauren, for helping me host the Zoom. Okay.